Hi, welcome to my video on the subtraction of decimals. Let's subtract whole numbers first. 64, subtract 23. Notice the decimal in 64 is on the right, the decimal in 23 is on the right. So the decimals are lined up. 4 subtract 3 is 1. 6 subtract 2 is 4. 347, subtract 156. Again, notice ones, tens, hundreds are all lined up. Decimals are on the right. 7 subtract 6 is 1. 4 subtract 5 can't do it, so the 3 becomes 2, and I make that a 14. 14 subtract 5 is 9. 2 subtract 1 is 1. Subtracting decimals follows the same rule as adding. The decimal points have to be placed underneath each other so that the correct place values are being subtracted. Let's look at 8. Subtract 1.53. Notice the decimals are lined up. 3 subtract 3 is 0. 7 subtract 5 is 2. Your decimal is underneath each other. 8 subtract 1 is 7. B. 6 decimal 8. The decimals are lined up. I'm subtracting. 4 subtract 8, you can't do it, so you make that a 6, and that's a 14. 14 subtract 8 is 6. 6 subtract 6 is 0. 7 subtract 0 is 7, and your decimal is underneath. 9.3 subtract 6.14, so it's 9.3. 6.14, the decimals are lined up. Now I have to put a 0 to the right of 3 because that's the hundredths place, but there's none of them. 0 subtract 4 you can't do, so the 3 becomes 2, and that's a 10. 10 subtract 4 is 6. 2 subtract 1 is 1. 9 subtract 6 is 3. 8 subtract 3.16, 8. The decimal is on the right. 3.16, we're going to subtract. There's no tenths, no hundredths. 0 subtract 6, you can't do it, so we can't, none there, so we make the 8 a 7, and that makes that a 10. But we still haven't got over to the hundreds, so the 10 becomes a 9, and hundreds becomes 10. 10 subtract 6 is 4. 9 subtract 1 is 8. Decimal down. 7 subtract 3 is 4. 4.84. And I have 4005 subtract 8.632. Notice the decimals are lined up. I have thousands placed, none of them, so I'll put a 0 there. Can't subtract, so 5 becomes 4. I had a 10. 10 subtract 2 is 8. 4 subtract 3 is 1. And again, I can't subtract with the 6 or the 8. So the 4 becomes 3, and that becomes a 10. But I still got to get over to the tens place. So 10 becomes 9, and I get a 10. 10 subtract 6 is 4. Bring in your decimal. 9 subtract 8 is 1. 3 subtract 0 is 3. And that's how you subtract decimals. You line them up and make sure your decimals are in the right spots. Let's review the subtraction idea. You'll see this later on in math too, so let's have a look at it. What about if we look at the statement 10 subtract 6? So that's 10 subtract 6. That's a 4. 43 subtract 21. That's easy. So that gives you 22. 10 less 6. So that's less is the same as subtracting. So that gives you the 4. 43 less 21. So we subtract again. Notice less is the same as saying subtract. But these three statements down here, all these, subtract 6 from 10. It's 10. Subtract 6. That gives me the 4. Notice the 10 goes first and the 6 goes second. So you reverse the order. Subtract 21 from 43, so that's 43, subtract 21. Again, notice 43 goes first, 21 goes second. And it's this, you're still subtracting the same as up here. 43 subtract 21, 43 subtract 21, 43, but it's the wording. Be careful with the wording. Subtract from reverses the order. 6 subtracted from 10 is the same thing. It's 10 subtract 6, which is 4. 21 subtracted from 43 is 43 subtract 21. 22 still. Notice the order is reversed with the from. 6 less than 10. 6 less than 10 is 10 subtract 6, which is 4. 21 less than 43 is 43 subtract 21, which is 22. Again, less than changes the order. Subtract from changes the order. You try these now to see if you get these right. 70 subtract 40, that gives us 30. 96 less 53 is 43. Notice subtract and less does not change the order. Subtract 12 from 30, it's 30. Subtract 12, and that's an 18. 20 subtracted from 56 is 56 first, subtract 20. So that's a 36. Notice subtract from, subtracted from. The order is changed. 13 less than 27 is 27, subtract 13, which is 14. Notice again, the order is changed. Just reviewing that concept because that's needed later on when we do polynomials, equations, word problems, etc. Let's continue. 4.1 subtract 1.9. 1.9, line up the decimals and subtract. 1 subtract 9 can't do it. 4 becomes 3. That becomes 11. 11 subtract 9 is 2. 3 subtract 1 is 2. 2 decimal 2. Subtract, so it's 9, 1.5. Line up the decimals is 7.36. We have put a 0 in the place of the hundredths. We're subtracting. Can't subtract. The 5 becomes 4, and that becomes a 10. 10 subtract 6 is 4. 4 subtract 3 is 1. Can't subtract. 9 becomes 8, and that becomes 11. 11 subtract 7 is 4. 8 subtract 0 is 8. And if you check it back, remember you can always check back by going 9 plus 2 is 11, but then 11 carry your 1. 3 plus 1 is 4. So you can check by adding the difference to the quotient number right here. 12.6 subtract 5.8. Can't subtract, so that's 11. That's a 1, sorry, and that's a 16. 16 subtract 8 is 8. 1 subtract 5 can't do it, so that's a 0, and that's 11. 11 subtract 5 is 6. So 6.8 is the answer. Subtract from, remember you have to reverse. 9.5 subtract 6.4. And 5 subtract 4 is 1. 9 subtract 6 is 3. And your decimal is lined up. Less than reverses the order, so 2.7. Subtract 0.416. You line up the decimals. No hundredths, no thousands. Can't subtract. So that becomes a 6. That's a 10. The 10 can't, I need it over here, so the 10 becomes a 9. And that makes that a 10. 10 subtract 6 is 4. 9 subtract 1 is 8. 6 subtract 4 is 2. 2 subtract 0 is 2. And we have the right answer. So pause the video, work these out to see if you're going to get the right answers. So 15 subtract 3.15, so 16.49. Line up the decimals, 315. They're lined up. We're going to subtract 9, subtract 5 is 4. 4 subtract 1 is 3. 16 subtract 3. Notice that's a 16. I can say that. If I want, I can make that a 0, make that a 16. Same thing. So 13.34. Less means subtract directly, so that's a 4.7. Don't have to change the order with a less. Can't subtract, so that's an 8. That's a 13. 13 subtract 7 is 6. 8 subtract 4 is 4, and the decimal comes down. Subtract 2.38 from, 7.19. So 7.19 goes first. 2.38 goes second. And I have to subtract. Notice the order is reversed. 9 subtract 8 is 1. Can't subtract there, so that's a 6, and that becomes 11. 11 subtract 3 is 8. 6 subtract 2 is 4. Bring down your decimal. Keep the decimals right underneath each other. Less than changes the order, so 2.436 subtract 1.214. Notice you change the order. 6 subtract 4 is 2. 3 subtract 1 is 2. 4 subtract 2 is 2. 2 subtract 1 is 1. And the decimal, bring it down. Now we have a little different one. Subtract 3.41 from the sum. So let's find from the sum. Let's find the sum first. Sum means, when you say sum, you mean add. So 2.5, 1.76, we're going to add. This is 0 hundredths. Add 6. 5 and 7 is 12. We got to carry a 1. That's a 3, 4. So there's a sum. Now it says subtract from. So that means the sum goes first. And we're subtracting 3.41 from the sum. So again, you do the sum, done, and from reverses it. So 6 subtract 1 is 5. 2 can't subtract 4, so that becomes a 3, and that becomes a 12. 12 subtract 4 is 8, and bring down your decimal. 3 subtract 3 is 0, so 0.85. Now you have a whole page of practice. So you can pause the video, work all these out. Now you can do these with a calculator too, but really I like to use the pen all the time. Practice with the pen. Let's go. Subtract 1.38. We're going to subtract. 2 subtract 8 can't do it, so that becomes a 3, and that's a 12. 12 subtract 8 is 4. 3 subtract 3 is 0. 3 subtract 1 is 2, so it's 2.04. And we have a 9.2. You subtract as you see it. I'm doing a short, without writing the 7.6 down, I'm just writing the 9.2 underneath. 6 subtract 2 is 4. 7 subtract 9 can't do it. That becomes a 0, and that becomes a 17. 17 subtract 9 is 8, so it's 8.4. And we have a 0.5 subtract 0.486. Notice we have no hundreds, no thousands. Put them there. We can't subtract here, so 5 becomes a 4. That becomes a 10. We can't do it, so the 10 becomes a 9. And notice that each time, 10 times the ones is 10, 10 times 100. So every time you borrow 1 from the one on the left, you're really putting a 10 onto that digit. That's why we're putting the ones there. So 10 subtract 6 is 4. 9 subtract 8 is 1. 4 subtract 4 is 0. And we get a 0. So decimal 0.14. 19 subtract 0.8. Subtract as you see it. You don't have to change the order. 7 subtract 8 can't do it. The 3 becomes a 2. 17. 17 subtract 8 is 9. 2 subtract 0 is a 2. Bring down your decimal. Can't subtract. 3 becomes 2. That's a 14. 14 subtract 9 is 5. 2 subtract 1 is 1. And that's a 4 subtract 1. So in the 4 has the decimal on the right. So 1.7 is there. So 4 is 4 decimal. So you put a 0. You can't subtract, so that makes that a 3. And that makes that a 10. 10 subtract 7 is 3. 3 subtract 1. We're subtracting. You get 2. 2.3. And we're subtracting here, so we line up the decimals. So the 5 and the 7 and the 2 lines up, the 3 and the 6. So that's ones, tenths, 1, tens, 100, tenths, hundredths. They all line up. So I have it written down right. Subtract. 8 subtract 6, 2. 5 subtract 3, 2. Can't subtract. 3 becomes 2. That becomes a 14. 14 subtract 5 is 9. Bring down your decimal. 2 subtract 7 can't do it, so that becomes a 0, and that becomes a 12. 12 subtract 7 is 5. Can't subtract. 6 becomes a 5, and that becomes a 10. 10 subtract 2 is 8, and 5 subtract 0 is 5. Just a little bit. Notice I keep boring here, but if you think try your calculator to see if you're right. Just make sure. Less than reverses the order. So 11.9 subtract 7.8. 9 subtract 8 is 1. Can't subtract, that's a 0, that's 11. 11 subtract 7 is 4. Bring down your decimal, 4.1. From, subtract from, you change the order. 4.88 is on the end, bring that over, and subtract 6.69. So notice, subtract from changes the order. Less than changes the order. 8 subtract 9 can't do it. That's a 7 and that's an 18. 18 subtract 9 is 9. 7, that's a 7. Subtract 6 is 1. 4 subtract 0 is 4. So 4.19. Number 4, subtract the sum of those two from this. So let's do the sum first. Keep that together. Sum means add. Sum is add. Addition. So put a 0 there. We're going to add these up. You get a 3, 8, 3 decimal place because you got to line up the decimals. Now it says subtract the sum, which is 3.83 from, so that's 3.83 when you put them together. From that, so that's 5.7. Subtract 3.83. Again, notice the order is reversed. Put a 0 there. Can't subtract. That's a 6 and that's a 10. 10 subtract 3 is 7. 6 subtract 8 can't do it. That's a 4. That becomes a 16. 16 subtract 8 is 8. 4 subtract 3 is 1. So it's 1.87. 3, 4, 8 decimal 7. And you're going to subtract 62.5. Less, when you see the word less, it stays as is. If you see less, then you got to reverse. 7 subtract 5 is 2. 6 subtract 2 is 8. 8 subtract 2 is 6. Can't subtract, so that becomes a 2. That becomes a 14. 14 subtract 6 is 8. 2 subtract 0 is 2. 286.2. Round to the nearest tenth. Well, let's subtract this. So we got to subtract 0.621. We're subtracting. Line up the decimals. 4 subtract 1 is 3. Can't subtract. That's a 7. That's 11. 11 subtract 2 is 9. 7 subtract 9 is 1. And we get 0 when we subtract. Now we got to round this to the nearest tenth. So the tenth is first place after the decimal to the right. If the number to the right, digit to the right is 5 or more, we add 1 on. So 1 plus 1 is 2. So 0.2. And all the other digits to the right of these digits here become 0. And that's the same as decimal 2. Simplify. Well, we got to do PEMDAS, P-E-M-D-A-S, or BEDMAS, your choice. But we do brackets and exponents first. So 9.47, subtract. When you add these, you can see you get a 5 and you get a 6. Add your tenths and add your unit ones. So we have our brackets done first. Next is, we got to do exponents. There's no exponents. Now we add, we multiply and divide from left to right. But there's no multiplication division, so that's done. Notice I'm crossing them out. Now I got to add and subtract. So I have to go from left to right. So let's do 9.47 first. Subtract 5.6. We do that subtraction first. 7, that's an 8. That's a 14, and that's an 8. And 8 subtract 5 is 3. So that becomes 3.87. Subtract. So notice I'm working from left to right. I do these two first, and then the next two. So when I subtract that, I get 3.87, 1.37. I'm going to subtract. 7 subtract 7 is 0. 8 subtract 3 is 5. 3 subtract 1 is 2. So 2.5. Hope you enjoyed my video on the subtraction of decimals. If you did, then click my like button, subscribe, Click the notification bell. There are more videos coming in the near future. Write a comment on my video if you wish, and visit my math website at mathfullyexplained.com. And you get the information about me, my degrees, teaching experience in math, the teaching strategies used in my videos. I use certain strategies to help students memorize their math, learn their concepts very easy. And a section on content, which has the topics, the number of videos on each topic. The topics completed are in black font, and the one that I'm going to do in the near future will be in red font. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.